Hi everyone, my name is Spencer Hatcher, and I am the other of your chaplain duo for this first week of the 119th camp season at St. Dorothy's Rest. It's the first season where we are together virtually, which, as Ethan talked about in his opening video, is in some ways really hard and really not what we wanted. And here we are, all the same. Next to me, I have my pug, Mary Stewart, who I only point out because, well, first because she's great, but also because you're probably going to hear her snoring in the background of this video and likely future videos. Everything is fine. That is quite normal. It was great to get to be with those of you who were able to join the Zoom call on Monday morning, and hopefully we'll get to check back in on Tuesday evening, as well as potentially even get to meet some new folks. Ethan, in that Monday morning Zoom call, introduced the Ignatian practice of the examen. And we talked about how we were going to kind of flip it on its head a little bit. And instead of being a daily practice, look and reflect back on the last 6 months, which have been a pretty unprecedented time. And to really pay attention, maybe by scrolling through our calendars or our social media feeds, or really sort of just turning our attention to what it's been like to live through these last 6 months. The good things, the heavy things, what has it meant for ourselves, for our families, for our friends, for the institutions that we love and support. And so we looked back over 6 months in order to hopefully spend a little bit of time reflecting on where it is that we are right now as we start this week together. And so we talked a bit about how the practice helps us to see and to notice and to pay attention in new ways to the fact that even when in the moment it might not feel like it, God is present in our lives in all times, in the good times and in the heavy times. And so hopefully you've had a chance to do that, and you've come to a sense of where it is, how it is that you are starting this week together, how we are all starting this week together. And so today, we want to start to talk a bit about what does it mean to set aside some space? How is it that space impacts our understanding of who we are and of who God is? One of my favorite parts about camp and about St. Dorothy's is that there are certain spaces where we go together where we know we are doing something together, whether that's the dining hall or town square or the chapel or the campfire ring. We know that these spaces are spaces where community is built, where we find God, where we make relationships with one another. There's something really important about the physical space where we are. And unfortunately, this year we don't get to be together in those spaces. I miss them. And it's also a challenge because if you're anything like me, the space where you do occupy, I know I moved from the desk setup that I have going where I sit on the couch to the desk setup, the standing desk setup, where I really just repurpose my kitchen table to when I'm feeling really wild, I can move my computer to my emergency exit and take a video call from there. But space is a weird thing. For some folks, there's a lot of people trying to do a lot of things out of one particular space. So maybe a living room is carrying a lot of weight this year, these last 6 months, that it's never had to carry alone before. And so what does it mean for us apart to set aside some space and to recognize that in the same way that God is present in all times, God is present in all space. And in fact, while those spaces that we come together at St. Dorothy's will continue to be important and are important right now, there are ways in which we can set aside important space together, even when we're not together. And so I'm going to turn it over to Ethan to talk a bit about what we're going to invite you into this week.
Thank you, Spencer. Here we are. Yeah, thank you for that introduction. It is a very weird thing to think about being in a week of virtual camp without being at camp. I think it's common to say, one of the best parts of camp is the place. One of the things that we tend to do in our religious tradition and our religious practice is to acknowledge and honor God's presence with us and among us by creating a little physical representation of that presence. An altar, or something like an altar. Again, we wish that we were up in the redwoods. We wish that we were together with all of our friends and with all of the counselors. And in its own way, St. Dorothy's is sort of an altar. The whole place is an altar. The soaring redwoods, the arch that you walk through to get into the property, the chapel, the whole forest, main house, Miriam house, all the different places hold this special meaning for us. And again, even the very setting, those redwoods, are an altar built to God out of creation itself. So we miss that place. And so what we're going to invite you to do today is to reverse the order of the cart and the horse. So normally we show up into a place and we feel God's presence and we build an altar there, or we acknowledge the altar that is already built there. We're going to flip that this time. So we're still at home. We are going to construct an altar in our own homes, and we're going to see if God shows up. Maybe God already feels present. Maybe you already have that like warm, fuzzy, big, expansive, gleaming feeling. But we're going to flip the order. We're going to build an altar and see if we can cultivate that feeling here in our own homes, even amongst the recycling and the garbage and the four walls that we've been inside of for months now. So we're going to build an altar. What can you put on your altar? You can put anything on your altar. You can put religious items, an icon, a cross, some artwork. You can put things from your own life that you appreciate, that sort of call out of you a sense of the deep or a sense of the great. So that might be books that are important to you, or little objects, trinkets, tchotchkes that hold particular meaning for you, mementos or souvenirs. You could put something like plants on an altar. You know the things in your own life that hold special meaning for you, that redirect your attention to God and to the divine and to questions of existential matters. Things that simply make you feel good and reorient your attention around great things. So that's what we're going to do. Spencer, I hope that sounds good to you. And I hope that maybe you've got an altar to show us.
Thanks, Ethan. I love the way you referenced the fact that this space of St. Dorothy's Rest that we all love in a variety of different ways is in and of itself an altar. I think that's a really neat way of looking at the spaces where we feel closest to God, or the spaces where we feel closest to one another, and maybe to God by connection, whether or not we name that. So I really appreciate that frame. And I do have an altar to show. Not that we planned this at all. So like Ethan said, I built an altar in my living room, and it was not easy. I will just say some sort of behind the scenes stuff, because this is kind of the real and messy part of this work, especially this time where we find ourselves. It wasn't really that easy to find a surface in my one-bedroom apartment that I didn't need for something else, but I found one. And so here is the altar that I put together, and I'll kind of show you it and walk through a little bit of why I chose some of the items, and how I attend to this space, and how I've had it built now for about 24 hours. And it's a silly thing, but I have to say it has been something where I have continually drawn my attention back to this space and been reminded of people that I love, of places that I miss, of places that I hope to be one day again, and of God who is continuing to show up in the midst of a really strange time. And so here is the altar that I put together. This is my altar, and it is just on a table that I initially used to hold this plant. I had to rehome that plant for now. So I put a cloth that was given to me by a parishioner in my first congregation. She used it as wrapping paper for a homemade basket that she made me. And so every time I see this, I think of it as wrapping paper now, because that's how she used it. So I put that on here. And then there are several different things. So this LaCroix magnet was given to me by a camp staff that I worked with, and it reminds me of all of the summers that I wanted to make sure there was enough cold LaCroix for staff on their breaks. Cilantro seeds and a cucumber that I grew in my garden. It is the strangest little tiny cucumber ever, but it has brought me such great joy to go out with my cup of coffee in the morning and check out my garden. A couple of homemade candles. This is over here is a cutting from a pothos plant that I love, my jade plant, a cross that a friend of mine carved for me, a piece of stone from a hike that I went on, a toy that one of my children who went to a congregation where I served gave me, a mug that was my goodbye present as I was leaving to come to seminary, a shell that I found when I was on a hike, 2 friendship bracelets from camp that have subsequently fallen off my wrist that I'm just not quite sure what to do with, and this feels like the perfect place for them. And I started this altar with only a couple of things, a couple of items, and I have found that throughout the last 24 hours that I've had this built, I've continued to see things and think, I want to put these in this particular space. None of these things are unto themselves incredibly significant. And sometimes I think that's the neat thing about an altar building practice is you make holy, you claim as holy, something that just feels mundane or normal. And it calls my attention, at least, to how significant those things are in my life, and especially in this weird year and in this weird summer, how significant a memory these things pull me into, and how much I can recognize and see and feel sometimes the way that God is present, even in a thing where I wouldn't have initially noticed God. And so that's my altar. Ethan, I'm going to turn it over to you because I know you made an altar that looks really different than mine.
I did make a different altar than you. And isn't that just so fun? Aren't we all different? Okay, here's my altar. You're gonna laugh. Here it is. It's smudgy. Okay, there we go. Okay, what have we got here? Here's some stuff. First, let's admire this poster. I got it from name of the company was called. But isn't that a nice framing for it? Okay, so here's a painting that I painted. It's a painting, there's nothing to say about it. Here are some books that are important to me recently. This right here is a scarf that somebody gave me as a, I almost said reward, as a thank you for house sitting and cat sitting while they went to Ireland, so they brought it back. Here's a succulent. This is maybe the first pot I ever bought. This is a bootleg cartoon character name withheld. It's Hello Kitty. I can tell the truth. My friend gave it to me. Here's another painting that I painted. Here's an icon. This icon has been important to me. It was a big part of my Episcopal Service Corps year, so that's great. Here's a little postcard my friend gave me from his church. Here is a house from the, I forget who they're called, but it's from a certain store that has a bullseye as the logo. Here's a candle that I got. I don't know, it's some grocery store somewhere. Here's a cross that I got on a mission trip in Belize. Here's a jar of pesto. I just love pesto. Pesto's really been helping me to hold the space in the middle of this pandemic. So this is frankly a sacred object to me. And then some little Reese's peanut butter cups. Actually, Pokemon goes on the altar too. So this is my altar. It's a little bit silly, but when I look at this space that I've set out for myself, it does a couple of things for me. Number one, I look at it and I think, my God, have I got good taste. Number two, I look at this altar and it frankly reminds me of myself. And it reminds me of who God made me to be, right? These things represent who I am and how I've been spending this time. So it's helpful. And number three, it helps just to ground me in the midst of this pandemic time. These are some of the things that I have been using to ground myself. And so they remind me of that. And so when I look at this altar, I see much more than, a couple of silly objects and two really great paintings. So it's fun. I'm excited about it. And I'm looking forward to seeing everybody else's altars that they make too.
So without further ado, we'd invite you to build altars with us. Maybe it's a side table, maybe it's a mantle, maybe it's a shelf, a part of a bookshelf. Add your objects that are significant, add silly things that have been occupying your heart or your mind or frankly your time in this season. Put the things that you love or the things that make you laugh or the things that remind you of who you are or of the people in your life who are important, and set it up in a space, if you can, if you have that space, set it up in a space where you can see it. And there doesn't have to be a particular practice around it, just some place that you walk by or that you see while you're on a Zoom call, or that you kind of have to shuffle around on your way to another room. Add some things to an altar. And then pay attention to what comes up for you as you look at these objects in maybe a new way or maybe in the same way. If you engage this practice, we would love to see what your altars look like. So share them with us in the comments of this video, or send them in to the email address for the summer. We'd love to see the altars that you make up. And I don't want to tell you what to do. You can do whatever you want. But I'd invite you to think about continuing to add to them. I'm probably at some point going to take that cucumber off of my altar because I want to eat it. So that's going to come off. Other things might come on. So as we move through our time together, as we move through maybe even the whole summer, shift things around, invite new things into that intentional holy space, and see what happens. And then tell us that too. We'd love to hear. I look forward to continuing to get to see and hear the way you all are engaging your time together and our time together, except apart. I will see you soon, and thank you. Amen.